Jai Dvaita Chanju Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chanju Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nithai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So we are now continuing with the second part of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, or the Ratha Yatra pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is all based on the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Madhya Lila, chapter 11 to 14. Yesterday we touched on 11 and half of 12. 11 we talked about the Beda Kirtan pastimes of the Lord, and there we saw a lot about how the Lord observed the Sena Yatra festival, and at the same time how King Prataparudra wanted to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's during this situation also that the Bengali devotees had arrived in Puri, and Mahaprabhu received them according to their intimacy with the Lord. And also it talks about how the Lord performed his pastimes, or rather his kirtan pastimes, going around the temple and chanting and dancing. Then we talked about how Maharaj Prataparudra in chapter 12, that is the cleansing of the Gundicha temple, how Mahaprabhu finally arranged certain situations wherein the king could be pacified by getting his own personal cloth or by embracing the son of the king. And then it immediately goes on to Mahaprabhu's desire to clean the Gundicha temple. So this is the day before the Ratha Yatra. The Gundicha Marjanam, or the cleaning of the Gundicha temple, happened. And it's mentioned that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu submitted his desire to the superintendent of the temple, which was Tulasi and Kashi Mishra. And these two associates, or these two personalities, were also dear associates of the king. And previously the king had told both of them that whatever Mahaprabhu wants, please arrange it. In fact, you should have the enthusiasm or the intelligence to immediately satisfy his desires, even without him asking. So here Mahaprabhu wanted the temple of Gundicha to be cleaned, and what these particular associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did was that they arranged for brooms, water pots, and so on and so forth to clean the Gundicha temple. Now the interesting thing here is that Tulasi brought 100 water pots and 100 brooms. And with that, Mahaprabhu took the devotees very happily to the Gundicha temple, and he started cleaning the temple. Now, the way Mahaprabhu began was that he started from the ceiling down. Common sense. So he started cleaning the ceiling and went down from there. And he specifically focused initially on the Simhasan, or the actual asan, or the place of seating for Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. And he started cleaning that area, and he instructed all of his devotees to start cleaning different areas of the temple. Now, very importantly, Kaviraj Goswami mentions that actually Tulasi told Mahaprabhu before he started the Gundicha cleaning that you don't really have to do anything. In fact, we can do it, but because you desire to do it, no one can stop you, so I'll arrange everything for you accordingly. So then Mahaprabhu wanted to teach or instruct by example how to clean. Now this Gundicha Marjanam, or cleaning of the Gundicha temple, is a very instructive pastime. In fact, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada have commented on it extensively. So if you go to the purport of 135, you'll see 5 pages of instructions on the whole purport behind the cleaning of the Gundicha temple. If there's time, I'll touch on it, but for now we'll go through the pastime. So we're going to touch, starting from chapter 12, text number 85. It's mentioned here in this section the specific details of where Mahaprabhu cleaned. So the Gundicha temple has the mandir. This is the place where they worship Lord Jagannath, and just outside that there's an area or yard where they perform kirtan, sankirtan, so on and so forth. So generally the bhoga is offered to the Lord in the mandir, and everyone stands outside in the yard and performs sankirtan. And that's something we'll see later on in the next chapter when Mahaprabhu actually goes to the Gundicha temple after the Ratha Yatra finishes. And that's the first half of the Ratha Yatra, and then there's the return Rath back to Nilachal. So Gundicha is actually situated in a province also known as Sundarachala. So Nilachala is where Jagannath Puri temple is, and next to the Nilachala district there's the Sundarachala, and in there is the Gundicha temple. Now I'll find text 82. Prabhupada actually speaks a lot about where Gundicha is. This Gundicha temple is situated 2 miles northeast of the Jagannath temple. At the time of the Ratha Yatra festival, Lord Jagannath goes to the Gundicha temple from his original temple and stays there for 1 week. After 1 week, he returns to his original temple. It is understood by hearsay that the wife of Indradyumna, the king who established the Jagannath temple, was known as Gundicha. There is also mention of the name of the Gundicha temple in authoritative scripture. And then Prabhupada talks a bit about the size of the Gundicha temple that Mahaprabhu personally cleaned. So Mahaprabhu went with his associates to Gundicha temple and started cleaning. And Mahaprabhu cleans the temple very nicely, including the ceiling. Because generally when you do cleaning of the temple on a general basis, you clean what you see. And that's usually below. But you don't see too much of the ceiling. But Mahaprabhu took careful note of cleaning everything in the temple. He cleansed it and put it back in its original place. And it's mentioned here that the Lord's companions cleansed and swept all the temple's buildings, small and big, and finally cleansed the area between the temple and the meeting place. Indeed, hundreds of devotees were engaged in cleansing all around the temple, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally carrying out the operation just to instruct others. And you'll see more details about why Mahaprabhu did that and the purport behind it later. But here Mahaprabhu did it with great jubilation. You see, Mahaprabhu descended to the material world to teach us how to act as devotees of Sri Krishna. So Mahaprabhu is teaching by example. Apani Achari Prabhu Jivara Shiksha, or Jivara Shikai. Prabhupada often quotes this, and he says that actually whatever Mahaprabhu did was simply to instruct others. So therefore in the previous chapter you would have seen, although King Prataparuja was such a pure devotee of Mahaprabhu, still Mahaprabhu didn't see him or meet with him saying that, you're a king, no matter how many good qualities you have that name king attached to it, which means you're contaminated. Just like you put a drop of alcohol in milk, it becomes contaminated. So Mahaprabhu was just teaching the world by example. Now in the next chapter, you will see a bit more of that, how Maharaj Prataparuja understood what Mahaprabhu was doing. And slowly he finally gets the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So in this section it's mentioned that the Lord, when he descends, the Lord in previous avatars came with many weapons. But when he descends as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his main weapon or his only weapon is his beauty. And it's mentioned that he conquers the hearts of others simply with his beauty. And Mahaprabhu, when he was cleaning this particular temple, it's mentioned that he was covered with dust and dirt, and it became transcendently beautiful. Now, if you look at Sri Krishna's pastimes, when he comes from the pasturing grounds of Vraja back to the city or back to the village, he's also decorated with the dust that's lifted up by the hooves of the cows. And it's also mentioned that he's extremely beautiful in that situation. So that same Vrajendra Nandan Krishna is experiencing the same enjoyment in cleaning the Gundicha temple as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At times, when cleansing the temple, Mahaprabhu shed tears. And when he shed those tears, sometimes he used to clean with those tears. And it's mentioned when Mahaprabhu shed tears, they used to come out of his eyes like syringes, because that is a symptom of ecstasy. In fact, they used to come out like torrents of tears. Later on you'll see in the pastimes, the Kirtan pastimes, that Mahaprabhu's tears were like rains during the Shravan season, that all the devotees around him would get drenched just by being around him while he danced. So Mahaprabhu's, that's how much ashru jale, that's how much tears were coming from his eyes. And so then he's saying that after the Simhasan, they went straight to the Bhoga Mandir, where the food of the deity is kept. And then he went to the yard and cleaned that. Then went to the residential quarters and cleaned that, all one after the other. So then Mahaprabhu started gathering all the dust and the dirt in his cloth and he threw it out. And all the devotees seeing Mahaprabhu repeated that process and also did that. Later on, Mahaprabhu then says to everyone that I will see how much dust and dirt, I will examine how much you have collected, and whoever's collected the least, they'll be fined. They'll have to give the others sweet meats, sweet cakes and sweet rice. So Mahaprabhu was very particular about how much they cleaned. In fact, it's mentioned that the collection of Mahaprabhu was greater than all the other devotees combined. So Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. Mahaprabhu was always going to be greater than the other devotees. So here, following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the devotees did that. They threw out all the dust and dirt. And Mahaprabhu tells the devotees, I can tell how much you have labored and how well you have cleaned the temple simply by seeing all the straw and dust you have collected outside. So again, purport will come in later on. And when he collected all the dirt, then he started going back into the temple and instructed the devotees, now clean it again. And then they went back again a second time and started brooming and cleaning the temple. And that's when Mahaprabhu ordered all the water pots to come. So it was mentioned that there were hundreds and hundreds of devotees doing this operation. There would be hundreds of them brooming, hundreds picking up water in the water pots, and hundreds refilling the water pots. And it's mentioned that because they collided with one another, it was natural that the water pots would break. So hundreds more would need to go and fetch new water pots. So all of these devotees were engaged. And the way they were engaged was that they would never speak anything other than the holy names of Krishna to interact with one another. One would say Krishna, Krishna and pass the water pot. The other one would say Krishna, Krishna and then he would pass the broom. In this way they would interact with each other in full Krishna consciousness under the direction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu was being very, very pleased seeing this cleaning work. In fact, it's mentioned that when they cleaned and chanted, by the time they had finished the cleaning of the temple, it was very pristine, clean. It was clear and it was cooling to the senses. In fact, it's mentioned it was so clean that it reflected the purity of the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when they cleaned, like when you go to Mayapur, you'll see when you do parikram, there's a little section at the bottom corner next to Panchatattva where there's a little outlet for water to go through. So what Mahaprabhu did was he blocked that and cleaned the whole temple, and then when it was finished cleaning, then he would open that outlet and all the water would come out. And it's mentioned that they had cleaned so thoroughly that even the roads coming to the temple, they were all cleaned and people couldn't understand how that was done. So in that way Mahaprabhu's cleaning was very thorough. Now, after this particular after this cleaning, and when Mahaprabhu's in ecstasy started cleaning all of the items in the Gundicha temple, it's mentioned that he personally used his own cloth to clean the Simhasan. Again, another purport behind that as well. Now, during this whole procedure, actually, I don't know if the Gundicha, in the picture of the Gundicha Marjanam, if you have a look in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see Mahaprabhu cleaning the altar, tears coming from his eyes, and all the devotees splashing water and cleaning. But then also when you look at Mahaprabhu's feet, you see some devotees pouring water on his feet and taking his charnamrit. So it's mentioned there while Mahaprabhu was absorbed in cleaning, some devotees, what they did was that they poured water on Mahaprabhu's feet and they drank that charnamrit. Others were engaged in begging and others were engaged in giving charity of that charnamrit of the Lord. So all the devotees knew how to enjoy and how to take the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And with those clean minds and with that clean heart, they chanted the holy names of the Lord, and the Lord corrected them and praised them accordingly. This is the interesting thing, that Mahaprabhu didn't directly chastise them. He said that he went to the devotee that did well and said, "You have done very well. the others should all see your service and they should act accordingly. And all the other devotees, being meek and humble, immediately understood what Mahaprabhu was saying, and feeling embarrassed, they put more and more energy and effort into their service. So in this way, Mahaprabhu encouraged his devotees to do more and more for Krishna's pleasure. At one particular point in time, while they were cleaning the temple room, one Bengali devotee came before Mahaprabhu and poured water on his feet and drank it directly. And Mahaprabhu became very upset and he became very angry. And he called Swarup Damodar and said, just look what your devotee has done. And Prabhupada says in the purport that actually by saying this, all Bengali devotees are under Swarup Damodar Goswami. Swarup Damodar Goswami is a direct giver of guidance for the Bengali devotees. And then Prabhupada talks a bit about how we also follow in the footsteps of the Goswamis also provide proper guidance. So we are following in their footsteps, and that guidance needs to be given in Krishna consciousness. Now, in this particular incident, Swarup Damodar then grabs the neck of this Bengali Vaishnava and he pushes him out of the temple. And then he comes back and asks Mahaprabhu to please forgive the offense of this devotee. Because Mahaprabhu is saying, what's going to happen to me? I'm in the temple of Sri Krishna and here's someone drinking the water from my feet. I don't know what hellish destination I will attain. Because when you're in the temple of the Lord is the one that receives all the awe and reverence and worship. No one else should be given that within the temple. If they accept it, they get the sinful reactions, and those giving it will also partake in that sinful reaction. Because it is an offense. It is a seva aparad against the Lord. So Mahaprabhu in this way was, again, he was pleased by this Bengali devotee's activities because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he was teaching by example as well, externally showing anger. So then after that's done, Mahaprabhu then cleans the Nishima temple that's nearby as well. Now coming to the purport, this is text number 135. Just briefly touch on main points that Prabhupada mentions here. And he says that this, in commenting on the cleansing of the Gundicha temple, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally giving instructions on how one should receive Lord Krishna. So the whole idea behind cleaning the Gundicha temple is like cleaning our hearts and requesting the Lord to come and sit on the lotus of our hearts. Srinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hiryantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti shuhit satam. That this Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who relishes his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So this whole purport focuses on this one thing. You want to become Krishna conscious, you want the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, association of Krishna, first you must cleanse the heart. And Mahaprabhu is taught, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, and that begins by chanting Hare Krishna. So by practicing this process of Krishna consciousness, by cleansing the heart, we're inviting the Lord to come and sit, because the Lord actually wants to come there. And the Lord wants to come and continue living within the heart of the devotee, and He wants to give directions for the soul to come back to Him. But the effort needs to be done on our part to be able to cleanse the heart and be able to hear what the Lord says. Because lifetime after lifetime, what we have done is ignored what the Lord has to say. And lifetime after lifetime, we have taken shelter of karma khanda, jnana khanda, yoga, and mystic yoga. And that's caused so much contamination in the heart that it's practically become dust that covers the mirror of the heart. And we've neglected the Lord so much that we've forgotten what it's like to receive the directions of the Lord. We no longer hear what the Lord has to say. Therefore, the Lord appears in His external manifestation as a spiritual master to be able to guide us back to Him. But here Prabhupada specifically mentions that the Lord wants to come and continue living within the heart of the devotee, and He wants to give direction, but one has to keep the heart clean. And so this whole purport talks about how different sections of the whole Gundicha temple cleaning reflects this. Just like when one performs devotional service, one will feel the cooling effects, one will feel peaceful, satisfied. Just as when they cleaned the temple, the cooling effect of that cleansing process affected the minds of the devotees. So in this section you'll read a lot about that, the different weeds in the heart of the devotee, different types of contamination, the desire for name and fame, envy of other living entities, fault finding, so on and so forth, and how by cleaning all of these things out thoroughly, just as Mahaprabhu did it once, twice, and then threw water on top of that. Similarly, we will need to labor very hard to get rid of these contaminations of the heart, to bring the Lord in. So Mahaprabhu taught that. And in fact, after this cleaning process, Mahaprabhu then began kirtan. And it's mentioned as this, at this point, Mahaprabhu washed the bodies of the other devotees simply with his tears. And then Mahaprabhu, he especially loved to hear Swarup Damodar Goswami singing. So he asked Swarup Damodar to sing. And in that ecstasy, he displayed the 8 symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. Now during this particular kirtan, the son of Advaita Acharya was there. And so Mahaprabhu encouraged him to start dancing. And Gopal was dancing and chanting. And this Gopal danced and danced and danced and then fainted. And when he fainted, all the devotees were shocked. And they all came forward, including Advaita Acharya, and picked up the boy and started chanting Nishingadev's names very loudly and tried to sprinkle water, but the boy wouldn't wake up. So immediately they started crying. And so then Mahaprabhu immediately came and put his hand on the chest of Gopal and said, "Gopal, get up." And immediately Gopal got up and started chanting and dancing. And all the devotees who started in ecstasy, started jumping up and dancing and chanting. So, as usual after kirtan, what happens? They take prasad. And Mahaprabhu started calling for Haridas Thakur. He said, "Haridas, Haridas, where is Haridas? Bring Haridas here. Haridas, come and take prasadam with us." And Haridas, because of his meek and humble nature, he stood far away and he told the Lord that, "Please, I cannot come. I am very abominable and sinful. I cannot come there." And he told the associates of the Lord, "Please tell the Lord that I will take later. Anyway, Govinda will save me some remnants. I will take that." And so Mahaprabhu stopped trying to persuade Haridas Thakur, understanding his mind. Now, when they sat down and took prasad, Mahaprabhu was immediately reminded of how Krishna sat with all the gopas in that lotus. Just as Mahaprabhu got all of his devotees to sit down and take prasad, he was reminded of how Krishna took prasad. But with great endeavor and patience, he remained sober and did not let the ecstatic emotions come out, knowing the time, place and circumstance. So Mahaprabhu knew how to taste and relish Krishna consciousness at every moment, at every time. And that's what he came to teach. So once this happened, Mahaprabhu then, out of his causeless mercy, then told the devotees serving, Jagadananda Pandit, Swarup Damodar, and their 7 other assistants, that you just give me simple prasad, just mixed vegetables, very simple prasad, that's enough. But the opulent prasad, the sweets and the cake, rice cakes and everything, you give it to all the devotees. Distribute it to them, but just give me the simple prasad. And so the devotees said, yes, okay, no problem. And what they did was, when Mahaprabhu wasn't looking or forcefully, they would serve Mahaprabhu the opulent prasad. And they would just keep serving Mahaprabhu all this opulent prasad. And Mahaprabhu would be extremely pleased, but externally show a bit of displeasure. And being pleased, Mahaprabhu would take all of this prasad. But although he was strict to take this prasad, he took it because Jagadananda gave it to him. Jagadananda Pandit is none other than Satyabhama. And it's mentioned that Jagadananda Pandit, when Mahaprabhu did not take the prasad of Jagadananda Pandit would fast. He would not take prasad. If Mahaprabhu did something and Jagadananda Pandit wasn't very happy with the reciprocation, he'd immediately fast. Of course, Jagadananda Pandit's mood is to give pleasure to the Lord by acting in this way. So he's in a transcendental platform. It's very difficult for us to understand, because sometimes we think, someone tells you to do something, you just throw it, just do it, take it, leave me alone, I'll just do something else. Or if someone does something against you and you feel very bad and unhappy, you feel a way of taking revenge will be to self-inflicted pain. But that's not how Jagadananda Pandit was acting. Jagadananda Pandit was acting out of pure love. He was helping the Lord return that loving emotional ecstasy that they shared between each other. So Mahaprabhu, be fearing that, immediately started taking prasad. And it's mentioned that at this point, something very uncommon happened. And what was very uncommon was that Swarup Damodar came before the Lord and told him, "Please take this Mahaprasad. Please kindly see what Lord Jagannath has taken." And in this way they would keep serving Mahaprabhu. Next to Mahaprabhu was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was also looking and was very pleased seeing the devotional service the devotees were doing and how Mahaprabhu was getting all the fine foodstuffs. And it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu wanted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to also take prasad as well, all the nice food stuff. And Gopinathacharya sitting next to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya started laughing. Just see this mundane logician. Now he's swimming in the ocean of ecstasy. He's in transcendental bliss. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya talks back and says, yes, just see the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he's made this crow into a Garuda. Just see the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that I was associating with the jackals of logic, chanting biu, biu. Prabhupada very often barking, biu, biu. But now I'm chanting the holy names of the Lord. And just see, this is all happening because I now have taken shelter of Mahaprabhu's associates, the devotees of the Lord. And it's mentioned straight after that, Kaviraj Goswami says, Mahaprabhu was always willing to increase the glories of his devotees. He was always waiting for an opportunity to give the mercy and to glorify his devotees more and more. And then on the other side, Nityananda Prabhu and Advaitacharya were having a loving quarrel. Advaitacharya is saying, he is an avaduta, no one knows his birth, no one knows his caste, no one knows where he's been, what he's doing. He eats here and eats there. I'm a Brahmana. If I sit next to him, then all my service is contaminated. People will start speaking bad of me. And then Nityananda Prabhu would then retort by saying that, actually, see here, you're a monist and your whole goal is oneness. You're Advaita, speaking Advaita Avad. And just see, if I sit with you, my mind will become disturbed. What will be my situation? And this way they were quarreling with each other. But Kaviraj Goswami says that actually, no one was able to actually understand the deep import between their quarreling. Because it appeared to be they were chastising each other, but they were praising each other. And then it's mentioned that they kept serving prasad. And then Mahaprabhu after that decided to distribute all his prasad to the devotees. Whoever begged got it. Govinda went and gave a portion of the remnants to Haridas. And once everyone was served, then Govinda sat down and took prasad. Then it's mentioned that the next day, Netrotsava, that is the day when Jagannath comes out for darshan after that 14-15 day period of Anavasara Kala, where the Lord, after bathing, becomes sick and goes into his personal quarters to be served by the Shabara devotees or the Daityas, the personal associates of the Lord. And it's also mentioned that's the 15 days that he spends in seclusion with the goddess of fortune. So, Netrotsava, the day when Lord Jagannath comes out to give his darshan, Mahaprabhu went towards the temple. It's mentioned that first Kashishvara Pandit would go in the front to part the crowd, to make sure no one was in the way. After that came Paramananda Puri and Brahmananda Bharati in front. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. On Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sides was Swarup Damodar and Advaitacharya, and then all the devotees came from behind following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when they went in to take darshan, it's mentioned that they were so absorbed or so captivated by the darshan of Lord Jagannath that rather than standing where they previously stood in the darshan hall, they went all the way into the section of the altar where the Lord takes his bhoga, which means right in front of the Lord. Technically, no one should go there, but out of their spontaneous loving devotional service, they immediately went before the Lord in such a way. And the description of the Lord given is very important. It's the darshan the devotees took through, and it is through their premanjana that they took that darshan. Through that loving sentiment of pure devotional service that they saw the Lord, Kaviraj Goswami is giving us that darshan as well. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is text number 211. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very thirsty to see the Lord, and his eyes became like two bumblebees drinking the honey from the lotus-like eyes of Lord Jagannath, who is Krishna himself. The eyes of Lord Jagannath conquered the beauty of blossoming lotus flowers, and his neck was as lustrous as a mirror made of sapphires. The chin of the Lord, tinged with a buff color, that's a pinkish red color, conquered the beauty of the banduli flower. The banduli flower is a red flower as well. This increased the beauty of his mild smiling, which is like lustrous waves of nectar. The luster of his beautiful face increased at every moment, and the eyes of hundreds and thousands of devotees drank its honey like bumblebees. So that thirst increased, and they continued to see the Lord. So then they started morning time darshan. And this continued till midday. And actually it's mentioned that the devotees had to remind Mahaprabhu, you need to take lunch now. So the whole morning went in that way to see the Lord. The next day, when the Ratha Yatra started, it begins with the ceremony of festival known as Pandu Vijaya. This Pandu Vijaya ceremony is when Jagannath leaves the throne and gets on the cart. And Maharaj Pratapruja specifically mentions that you must allow all of the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be able to see it. Because when you have such a great big festival, and especially something on the scale of Jagannath's Ratha Yatra, it's very difficult to get a certain vantage point to be able to see the Lord's pastimes, Lord Jagannath's pastimes. So then Maharaj Pratapruja arranged so that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates would be able to see clearly. Now, once Lord Jagannath came from the altar, it's mentioned his associates known as the Daitas. Daitas are those who were elevated to the respectable status. They were originally Shabaras, and they are often known for raising and killing pigs or eating pigs. But Jagannath raised them to the status of being able to personally worship and serve him. And so they dedicated their whole lives to the service of Lord Jagannath. And they were big devotees. They were well built to be able to hold and take Jagannath from the altar all the way to the cart. Now the process by which they did it was that they used to tie silk rope around Jagannath's waist, and one person would hold the rope on one side, the other one would hold the other side. One would hold his arm, one would hold his shoulder, one would hold his feet, and they would take Jagannath. But because Jagannath is so heavy, they'd take him from one pillow to the other. So there'd be pillows arranged from the throne all the way to the cart, and they'd take Lord Jagannath from one pillow to the other. And at certain points of time, when they dropped or they placed Jagannath on the pillow would break out of the great heaviness and weight of Lord Jagannath. And Lord Jagannath is the master of the universe. The universe exists within his abdomen, but still he allows his devotees to take him there. This section also talks about an elaborate description of the Ratha, how there's many chamars around, pictures, flags, ornaments, and so on and so forth, how there was a clean canopy, and it looked like Mandara mountain, Sumeru mountain, very big. And it's mentioned here that those 15 days Jagannath spent within seclusion with the goddess of fortune, he then takes her permission to come out and give mercy to the devotees who are bereft of his darshan. But when Jagannath comes out, there's soft sand that's spread across the road. And then the gardens are arranged very beautifully for him. And that immediately reminds him of Vrindavan, because the soft sand reminds him of the sand on the banks of Yamuna, and the gardens remind him of the forests of Vrindavan. And so Jagannath gets on the Rath, and then there are other devotees known as the Gaudas, and they're the ones specifically tasked with pulling Jagannath's chariot. And so Mahaprabhu arranges a kirtan to happen, 4 parties, 24 chanters plus 2 mridangas per party, so 32 people in each party. But then Mahaprabhu, after some consideration, then decides to change the whole thing. He then changes the 4 parties to 7 parties. And then he has Sarup Damodar lead one, Srivas Thakur lead another, Mukunda lead another, Govinda Ghosh would lead one, the devotees of Kulinagram, Shantipur and Kandar led the last 3. And each one would have 2 mridangas, so there was 14 mridangas. And it's mentioned the vibration was so loud that it vibrated and agitated the universe. It was so loud that it's not that anyone could not hear anything except this kirtan. That's how loud it was. So Mahaprabhu arranged the Rath, when it was going, it would have 4 of the kirtan party in front, 2 on each side of the Rath, and 1 in the rear. And this way the 7 parties were arranged, and Mahaprabhu would then arrange the kirtan. Each of the party would have its own dancer, and each of the party would have singers. We can read about those particular singers and dancers in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the beginning of the 13th chapter of Madhya Lila, so you can go through that in your own time. But today being the appearance day of Vakeshwar Pandit, it's mentioned throughout this whole Lila that Vakeshwar Pandit was requested by the Lord to dance, because Vakeshwar Pandit was an expert dancer. So him, Advaita Acharya, Nityananda Prabhu, and there was one more, Srivas Thakur, I believe. Or Srivas Thakur was singing. But yeah, these were the main devotees that Mahaprabhu would always ask to come and dance. So while they were dancing and chanting, it's mentioned that at this point in time Mahaprabhu showed his opulence. Just as previously Mahaprabhu, when he had the 4 kirtan parties and the Beda kirtan pastimes there, and he was looking simultaneously at all 4 dancers and singers, similarly at this time he appeared in all 7 groups. And each group was thinking, just see how fortunate we are. Mahaprabhu is only in our group. He's not in any other group. And when this happened, Jagannath immediately stopped the cart to have a look at, see the dancing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in each of these parties. And it's mentioned that because of the service rendered by Prataparudra Maharaj, he was able to see this wonder, which is not ordinarily able to be seen by all the devotees. Because there are devotees, the confidential devotees of the Lord knew that the Lord was present in all the other kirtan parties, but not all the devotees knew that. And it's mentioned that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Kashi Mishra, they glorified the Lord's special mercy that he had been blessed or bestowed upon him. And what are the 2 things that were the mysteries that he was able to see? One, he saw how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath were interacting with each other. Lord Jagannath was Krishna himself, and Mahaprabhu was in the mood of Srimati Radharani. And as a devotee, they were both, and the master, the lover and the beloved, they were both exchanging loving interactions. And Prataparudra Maharaj was able to see that. And only confidential servants were able to see that. And the second thing was the presence of the Lord in all 7 places. So these 2 things is what Maharaj Prataparudra was blessed to see. And then it's mentioned that the dancing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so great and uncommon. The pastimes of Mahaprabhu's dancing was equivalent to the uncommon pastimes of Krishna dancing in the Ras Leela. So the dancing of Mahaprabhu was also a very confidential thing, very mysterious and very difficult, confidential to be able to see regularly. So then here at this point, Mahaprabhu stops dancing and folds his hand in front of Lord Jagannath, and he starts praying to Lord Jagannath. Namo Brahmanya Devago Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. And he offers other prayers like Naham Vipro Na Chandrapati Napi Vaishyo Na Shudro Naham Varni Na Chagrihapati No Vanasto Gatirva Kintur Prodhya Nikala Paramananda Purnamrita Abdir Gopir Bhatur Padakamalayur Das Das Anudas. So Mahaprabhu is teaching us, when you come before the Lord, we should be able to offer selected prayers, because He is Uttama Shloka. He is praised by the greatest of poetry. We should come before Him and we should offer some prayers towards Him. So Mahaprabhu prays, and immediately he breaks out into ecstasy and starts dancing. And Prabhupada explains, just as you'll see, many would have seen that you'll see street performers, and they'll have a stick with a fire at the end of it. And when they twirl the stick, it looks like the fire is making a circle. So in the same way, Mahaprabhu was jumping up and down and dancing and going around. It's so fast, it looked like he was a firebrand, just going around in circles and circles and dancing and chanting. And it's mentioned when Mahaprabhu jumped up, Kaviraj Goswami explains, when he came back down, because Mahaprabhu is the shelter of the universe, it's mentioned that even the earth started tilting under the weight of Mahaprabhu's jumping up and down. And he started displaying ecstatic symptoms. And Nityananda Prabhu was always ready to catch Mahaprabhu whenever he jumped. And when he fell down, Mahaprabhu, he would always come forward to catch Mahaprabhu, who would fall down in ecstasy. And again, Mahaprabhu then requests Swarup Damodar to start singing. And when Swarup Damodar starts singing, then Mahaprabhu goes into greater ecstasy. It's mentioned that Swarup Damodar and Mahaprabhu, they were so intimate and close that Swarup Damodar's senses was as equal, as good as Mahaprabhu's senses. So Swarup Damodar knew exactly what the Lord's mood was, and he would sing accordingly to further give that physical form for the Lord's ecstasy, so that the Lord's mood, so the Lord would then relish it and chant and dance with more greater ecstasy and churn and experience and taste that mellow of devotional service. Another important detail is mentioned that when Mahaprabhu was dancing, there would always be 3 circles of devotees around him. First circle was arranged by Nityananda Prabhu and his personal associates. The second was Kashishwar and Govinda and their associates. And finally Maharaj Prataparudra and his officers would cover the third circle. And this is how Mahaprabhu would dance and how the crowd was kept from interrupting. one particular point in time of the dancing, Maharaj Prataparuja was very eagerly absorbed in seeing the Mahaprabhu's dancing in ecstasy. And it's mentioned that at that point in time, Srivas Thakur came within the vision, the direct vision of Prataparuja Maharaj seeing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing. And there it's mentioned that Srivas Thakur was in ecstasy seeing the Lord dance, that he was stunned. And so one of the officers of Prataparuja, Hari Chandana, tried to push Srivas Thakur out of the way. So he gently pushed him. Srivas Thakur didn't respond because he was stunned, stambhabhav. He was absorbed in that ecstasy. And again he pushed, and again he pushed, and Srivas Thakur, feeling disturbed, immediately turned around and slapped Hari Chandana in the face. And so then Hari Chandana was shocked, and he was going to go forward to retaliate, but then Prataparuja grabbed him, and Prataparuja Maharaj told him, "This is a great fortune that a pure devotee has slapped you. He has given you his mercy." So then that's when Mahaprabhu then goes in front of Lord Jagannath. This is the interaction Mahaprabhu had with Lord Jagannath in the Ratha Yatra. As Jagannath would go forward, Mahaprabhu would dance in the front, and Jagannath would come forward towards Lord Chaitanya. And when Lord Chaitanya, he would dance, then he would slowly lag behind the chariot. And then immediately Jagannath's chariot would stop still. It wouldn't move forward until he saw Mahaprabhu come to the front again. So it's in that purport, Prabhupada mentions that actually this is the loving exchange between Srimati Radharani and Krishna. When Srimati Radharani is taking Krishna back to Vrindavan. Nilachal represents Dwarka and Gundicha represents Vrindavan. So this is Srimati Radharani bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan. It's a very confidential, intimate explanation given in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It will take some time to explain, but the reason they interacted in this way was that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, experiencing the bhav of Srimati Radharani and serving the Lord Jagannath in that way, was coming forward before the chariot and bringing Sri Nandanandana, Lord Jagannath, back to Vrindavan. But then she was feeling engaged in a loving interaction with the Lord, with Krishna, saying that, will you come back? So then she lagged behind the chariot. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lagged behind the chariot. And Jagannath, seeing that emotion, immediately stopped, saying, yes, I'm coming. I'm coming, don't worry, I'm coming back to Vrindavan with you. So in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath were having such intimate dealings that only confidential devotees, and Prataparuja Maharaj was one of them, could actually see and experience and understand. And this is the point where Mahaprabhu starts displaying ecstatic mood of Srimati Radharani. So much so that it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu sprinkled everyone there. Everyone's mind was sprinkled with the transcendental love of Godhead. All the associates there, all the devotees, all the people that just came to watch, they weren't even devotees. People just came to observe the function. Everyone in the universe, their mind was sprinkled with the transcendental love of the Lord. At this point in time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, while dancing, he happens to collapse out of ecstasy in front of Prataparuja Maharaj. At this time, it just so happened that Nityananda Prabhu was on one side in ecstasy, chanting and dancing, and Advaita Acharya and all the other associates were chanting on another side. So obviously it was prearranged, because Nityananda Prabhu wouldn't let the Lord immediately do something like that. So then Maharaj Prataparuja very respectfully picked up Mahaprabhu, and when Mahaprabhu came to external consciousness and saw what Prataparuja Maharaj had done, he chastised him very severely, saying that how can a sannyasi have come in contact with a materialist like the king? And immediately Prataparuja Maharaj was very fearful and scared. But then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya pacified him. Don't worry, this is just an external show of anger. He's just teaching by example. He's trying to teach everyone how a sannyasi should act, but actually internally he's very pleased. The Lord has blessed you, has given you His mercy. So then after that, Mahaprabhu then goes and sees Balaram, Baladev, and then he sees Subhadra, and he comes back to Jagannath, starts dancing in this way. And they reach a place called Balagandi. And that's where Jagannath sees on his left hand side coconut trees and the different ornaments of Nilachal, and on the right side he sees the Jagannath Vallabha gardens, or the gardens that represent Braja. And seeing this, Jagannath becomes extremely pleased and satisfied. He stops the chariot there. And when he stops, then the devotees, the whole district in that area, the Brahmanas would come forward and offer their bhoga. The people from Nilachal came and offered their bhoga. The people from Sunjarchal, the Gundicha temple area, came and offered their bhoga. Everyone, the king, the queen's children, the king's family, visitors that just came from a different town, district, state, place altogether, they all brought the best foodstuffs to offer to Lord Jagannath. And Kaviraj Goswami says there was no rules, no regulations. Whatever they brought, Jagannath accepted. And they had so much preparations that all around the cart and throughout all the gardens, there was just bhoga lined up for Jagannath to enjoy. And Mahaprabhu, seeing this, was very happy and went to the garden to take rest. And that's how the third, and his devotees, they all went to take rest. And this is how the 13th chapter ends. Now the 14th chapter begins talking about how when Mahaprabhu went to take rest, that's when Prataparuja Maharaj came in a simple attire and started massaging Mahaprabhu's feet while he was lying down. And while massaging Mahaprabhu's feet, he recited the Gopi Geet that was part of the plan that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had given. And when he recited the Gopi Geet, Mahaprabhu immediately told him, you go on, sing more, describe more. And so then he came to the point of describing the verse. Do you remember that verse? Tava Katamritam, thank you. So that's when he starts reciting the verse, Mahaprabhu goes into great ecstasy and starts embracing him. And in that embrace, Mahaprabhu in ecstasy cries and sheds tears, and Prataparuja Maharaj in ecstasy starts crying and shedding tears, and they both drench each other and experience loving emotions with each other. And then Mahaprabhu says that I don't know who you are, but and I don't know where you have come from, but I'm indebted to you. What can I do to please you? What can I do to repay you for this? And Prabhupada and Kaviraj Goswami mention here that actually Mahaprabhu didn't give mercy after getting the introduction. He freely gave mercy without any introduction. And they glorify Mahaprabhu for being Mahavadanyaya for that reason. That someone just rendered a little amount of service to the Lord, and the Lord was so pleased that He did not care who they were, what they were, where they're from, their past. He just bestowed mercy, Krishna Prem, upon them immediately. In this case it was Prataparuja Maharaj. And Prataparuja Maharaj then replies to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saying that, I don't want anything, just please give me your service. Just please give me your service, and more importantly, please let me become the servant of your servants. And in that purport, Prabhupada says, this is what Prahlad Maharaj prayed for. This is what Dhruva Maharaj prayed for. This is what Kolavecha Sridhar prayed for. This is the best benediction we can ask from the Lord. Actually, Prahlad Maharaj even mentions, there's this nice verse that when Sri Nrsingadev asked Prahlad, please ask for me a benediction. Prahlad Maharaj says, Yadi dasyasi me kaman varamstam varadarshava kamanam hridiyasmoham bhavatastu vinevaram. He says, O best of the givers of benediction, if at all you want to bestow a benediction upon me, please let there be no trace of material desire from within the core of my heart. So this is the mood of the devotee, that they don't want anything for themselves, and they will just want to become the servant of the servant, because that is the greatest position to be in. After this, Mahaprabhu sits down to take prasadam, and he's very pleased seeing all the bhoga that had been offered to the Lord, the prasadam that he takes, and he becomes eager to feed all his kirtaniyas especially, because he knew how laboriously they chanted and how intensely they chanted. So he brought them close, and he sat down everyone to eat, and he fed them all their favorite items, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then no one was eating. And Sarup Damodar again came to Mahaprabhu, please sit down, they will not take prasad unless you start taking your prasad. So then Mahaprabhu went and sat down in the association of Paramananda Puri, Brahmananda Bharati, Advaita Acharya, Nityananda Prabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and he started to honor his prasad. And Mahaprabhu made sure, he told Sarup Damodar, make sure everyone takes prasad in ample amounts, to the extent that he fed everyone up until their necks. Right? Up until their neck. So then it reminds me of how Prabhupada used to have a signal for when Yamuna Mataji used to cook for him. Prabhupada would have different signals to tell her how good her prasad was. So he would get his hand and he would raise it to his neck, or he would raise it above his head. So if it was up to the neck, it was good, and if it was above the head, it was like perfect. Prabhupada was completely filled up. So Mahaprabhu would feed all his devotees up to the neck, and there was so much leftovers that was from that whole prasadam distribution. So Mahaprabhu instructed Govinda, you go and give it to all the beggars and people who are poverty stricken. And Prabhupada mentions in that purport that actually those, whether you're poor or rich, doesn't matter in Krishna consciousness. What you need is the mercy and the transcendental loving relation with the Lord, loving emotions for the Lord. That's all you need. There's no such thing as a rich devotee or a poor devotee. So Prabhupada mentions that we should freely give Krishna consciousness to others. Now, after they took prasad, they went back to continue the Rath to Gundicha temple. And it's mentioned that the Rath didn't move. Jagannath did not want to move from Balagandi. He just stood there. And the Gaudas, the original devotees that wanted to pull Jagannath, they pulled and pulled and pulled, and Jagannath didn't budge. So then the king sent his finest wrestlers to go and pull. And they pulled, and it didn't work. The king himself came and started pulling, and it didn't work. So then the king brought his elephants, and they were tied up, and they pulled, and they were being poked and incited to pull, and they started screaming, and the elephants were pulling, and it wasn't moving. Jagannath didn't want to move. It kind of reminds me of this incident that happened here in Sydney a long time back. One of our pujaris here, Kishore Mohan Prabhu, we had gone for Ratha Yatra, I think it was in Liverpool. And Kishore Mohan Prabhu was there, and it was time for Jagannath Baladev Subhadra to come back to the temple for their fruit offering. So they had to leave there at least by 3 to come here so that they can take their boga. So then at that time the head pujari had asked Kishore Mohan Prabhu to please pick up the deities and take them back. And it was scheduled at the same time they were leaving that some children had to perform for Lord Jagannath's pleasure. So when then Kishore Mohan Prabhu was trying to pick up Lord Jagannath, he mentions that it was so heavy he couldn't move them. Like they who were very easily moved from North Sydney all the way to Liverpool by him, at that point in time, no matter how much he tried to lift, they wouldn't budge. And so they went ahead with the program, and the kids came and they did their performance, and they left. And when Kishore Mohan came back after the performance to pick up Lord Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, they easily came. They easily went back and came back to the temple. So, yeah, when Lord Jagannath desires something, nobody can stop him. So here, was he part of the play? Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. So Lord Jagannath was part of the play. Obviously he didn't want to leave. So here, when we see this incident here, same, when Lord Jagannath did not want to leave Balagandi, at that point in time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stepped in and he released the elephants and told his devotees to hold the ropes, and he himself went behind the chariot and put his head on the chariot, and he pushed. It's mentioned that the devotees didn't even do anything. They were just holding the ropes. Although it looked like they were pulling, for them, there was no effort on their part to make Jagannath's chariot move. Simply by Mahaprabhu putting his head and pushing from the rear, Lord Jagannath decided to move. So then that's how they continued on with their journey to Gundicha temple. Once they reached there, Lord Jagannath was moved to his throne, his asan there, and he was performed an abhishek, and after the abhishek, the boga offering was performed. During that time, Mahaprabhu did Sankirtan, and then after that he retired to Aitota to take rest, and specifically near the Jagannath Vallabha gardens that were in the area. So for 9 days, it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu would perform Sankirtana for the Lord, morning, midday, and in the evening. And it's mentioned that when Lord Jagannath was in Gundicha, it was like as if for Mahaprabhu, Krishna was in Vrindavan. And for Mahaprabhu, who was in the ecstasy of Srimati Radharani, he was experiencing highest bliss because he had finally brought back Prananath, finally brought back Krishna to Vrindavan so that he could serve him. So in the gardens around this particular Sundarachal or the Gundicha temple, Mahaprabhu would perform Vrindavan pastimes, and then he would go and perform the water sporting pastimes in the rivers or in the lakes known as Indudumna or Narendra, in the Narendra Sarovar. And it's mentioned there that they would go in the lake and Mahaprabhu would splash the devotees and the devotees would splash Mahaprabhu. And there's a very sweet exchange here that first Nityananda Prabhu started splashing Advaita Acharya and Advaita Acharya started splashing Nityananda Prabhu, and they both were starting quarreling and arguing with each other. Then after that, all these other devotees that were actually quite senior, Mahaprabhu at this point in time is roughly around 24, 26, 27 years old from our material or our mundane vision. But all the other devotees, they were very much elder to him. But here they are splashing water on each other like young children. So here at this time, Mahaprabhu was seeing all these different devotees splashing water. He would see Srivas Thakur and Gadadhar Pandit, Sarup Damodar and Vidyanidhi. And he saw Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya fighting in the water with Sri Ramananda Roy. And both of them had lost their gravity and were playing like children. So Mahaprabhu then sees that and tells Gopinath Acharya. He says that tell Bhattacharya and Ramananda Roy to stop their childish play because they are both learned scholars and very grave and great personalities. And Gopinath Acharya says, I believe that one drop of the ocean of your great mercy has swelled up upon them. A drop of the ocean of your mercy can drown great mountains like Sumeru and Mandara. Since these two gentlemen are like little hills by comparison, there is no wonder that they are being drowned in the ocean of your mercy. So this is the pastimes they had, and it gave Mahaprabhu so much pleasure. So after this particular splashing of water pastime, it's explained Mahaprabhu would have these particular leelas with these devotees. They would go see Jagannath, they'd go to the gardens, they would enact Krishna's pastimes, they would dance. Mahaprabhu would get Swarup Damodar to sing, then he'd get Rakesha Pandit to dance, and he would sing. And then in this way Mahaprabhu would relish the mellows of devotional service. And then they would go into the water, and then they would have a loving fight there, and then come out, take prasadam, and then Mahaprabhu would take rest in the Jagannath Vallabha gardens. Now, 5 days from the beginning of Ratha Yatra, there's a special festival called as Hera Panchami or Lakshmi Vijaya. And this particular festival is a very interesting festival because it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu actually went back to Nilachal to be able to observe this festival because they were staying in Sundarachal. So they went back 2 miles back to Jagannath Puri, back to the temple of Lord Jagannath. And it's mentioned there, let's see if I can get it for you. It's mentioned there that Maharaj Pataparudra at that time had told his Kasi Mishra and Tulasi Padat, the superintendent of the temple, he had told them that, just empty the godowns. Whatever's in my stock, my personal stock, whatever's in the temple stock, just get all the decoration items out, and it should be grand. Double the prasadam distribution. It should be such a grand festival that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates have never seen it before. So then at that time, Mahaprabhu was seated with his devotees outside this particular area where they were to perform this particular drama of Lakshmi Devi chastising the associates of Lord Jagannath and trying to bring Jagannath back to Nilachal. It's mentioned here that Mahaprabhu started questioning Swarup Damodar. He says, why does Lord Jagannath go to Gundicha and not take Lakshmi Devi? Why does he get angry? And Swarup Damodar answers all these questions very simply. He tells Mahaprabhu that actually, you see, Lord Jagannath spent so much time with Lakshmi Devi for 15 days. He came out to please the devotees and he went to Gundicha. But the reason why Lakshmi Devi was not allowed to come because Gundicha represents Vrindavan. I'll repeat exactly what... My dear Lord, please hear the reason for this. Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune, cannot be admitted into the pastimes of Vrindavan. Because this whole Ratha Yatra pastime is reflecting how Srimati Radharani wants to bring Krishna back. When they met in Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse, it is Srimati Radharani longing for Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. She wants Krishna in his form as a cowherd boy, not the king, the prince with many wives. She wants him to come back to Vrindavan to serve him. And this whole Ratha Yatra pastime reflects that, when the Gundicha temple is Vrindavan and Nilachal represents Dwarka, and this is how Srimati Radharani is pulling Jagannath back to Vrindavan. And he's taking his Balaram and Subhadra as a pretense, as a way to somehow get himself out of Nilachal and not cause any suspicion with the goddess of fortune, Srimati Lakshmi Devi. In the pastimes of Vrindavan, the only associates are the gopis, but for the gopis no one can attract the mind of Krishna. Using the car festival as an excuse, Krishna goes there with Balaram and Subhadra. Now, why does she get angry? Swarup Damodar says that it is the nature of a girl afflicted by love to become immediately angry upon finding neglect on the part of her lover. So Lakshmi Devi's service, in one sense, is like this. This is her mellow. This is how she churns and receives the reciprocation of the Lord and gives him pleasure in this way. So while they were talking like this, suddenly the procession of the goddess of fortune comes by. And she's riding on a golden palanquin carried by 4 men bedecked with varieties of jewels. So full opulence, she comes, and all her maidservants are decked out in jewels and stuff. And they come forward, and then when they come forward, they are carrying umbrellas, chamars, flags, musicians, dancing girls. The whole procession comes forward. And when they come in an angry mood, they arrive at the main gate of the temple, accompanied by many members of her family. And they were all with uncommon opulences. And when they came there, they began to arrest all the principal servants of Lord Jagannath. They bound them, handcuffed them, and made them fall down at the lotus feet of the goddess of fortune. Indeed, they were arrested just like thieves who have all their riches taken away. So in this way, they embarrassed the servants of Lord Jagannath. And when they came before the servants of Jagannath came and fell before the goddess of fortune, they were chastised and they were made the butt of jokes and loose language. So they were chastised and cursed and so on and so forth. And when Mahaprabhu saw that and the associates saw that, they covered their faces and started smiling. And Swarup Damodar starts saying that there is no egoistic pride like this within the 3 worlds. At least I have neither seen it or heard of it before. When a woman is neglected and disappointed out of egoistic pride, she gives up her ornaments and morosely sits down on the floor, marking lines with her nails. I heard of this kind of pride in Satyabhama, Krishna's proudest queen, and I've also heard of it in the gopis of Vrindavan, who are the reservoirs of all transcendental mellows. And then this pulls forward into a whole discussion about how the gopis give Krishna pleasure by their attitude. And it's a bit confidential, intimate, a bit beyond me. So I'll let all listeners here to read through Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is chapter 14, Performance of the Vrindavana Pastimes. And once Swarup Damodar finishes explaining to Mahaprabhu the egoistic pride in the sense that it's not the false ego that is represented or shown or exhibited by us conditioned souls. Rather, it's the pure ego of, I am a servant of Krishna, I will act in such a way that will give Krishna pleasure. In fact, it's mentioned that Krishna derives more pleasure from the sharp words of his lovers than the Vedic hymns chanted by great personalities. He doesn't find such great pleasure from those Vedic hymns as he finds pleasure from hearing the chastisement of his loving cowherd girlfriends. So that's this section. Once it comes to this particular Swarup Damodar finishes explaining about this pride of the gopis and of Srimati Radharani's ornaments of ecstatic love. Srivas Thakur, text 203, interjects. And in the mood of Narad Muni, because he is none other than Narad Muni, in the mood of Aishwarya Bhav, he then tells that, my dear sir, please hear how opulent my goddess of fortune is. As far as Vrindavan's opulence is concerned, it consists of few flowers and twigs, some minerals from the hills, a few peacock feathers, and the plant known as Gunja. So he really downgrades the opulence of Vrindavan just to increase that sort of argument that he has with Swarup Damodar. When Jagannath decided to see Vrindavan, he went there, and upon hearing this, the goddess of fortune experienced restlessness and jealousy. She wondered, why did Lord Jagannath give up so much opulence and go to Vrindavan? To make him a laughingstock, the goddess of fortune made arrangements for much decoration. And this is why they came and chastised, the maidservants came and chastised Lord Jagannath's servants. Your master is so expert at everything, but why does he do such things? Please bring your master before the goddess of fortune. And so this way, Srivas Thakur starts glorifying Vaikunta, glorifying the goddess of fortune, and how the servants of goddess of fortune displayed so much opulence, and how they chastised Lord Jagannath and his associates. And so then the Lord Jagannath's servants, they couldn't do anything but submit to the goddess of fortune, and they assure her that yes, Lord Jagannath will come tomorrow. We'll bring him tomorrow. Don't fear. After that, Lakshmi Devi, she goes back to her apartment in happiness. But when he says this, Srivas Thakur continues, your gopis are engaged in boiling milk and churning it to turn it into yogurt. But my mistress, the goddess of fortune, sits on a throne made of jewels and gems. So he's making that juxtaposition, that comparison. And he's doing it in such a way to incite Swarup Damodar to start speaking the glories of Vrindavan Dham. So Srivas Thakur, who was enjoying the mood of Narad Muni, thus made such jokes. Hearing him, the personal servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to smile, because they knew what was coming. And so Mahaprabhu says, my dear Srivas, your nature is exactly that of Narad Muni. The Supreme Personality of Godhead's opulence is having a direct influence on you. And so Swarup Damodar then begins to glorify Shri Vrindavan Dham. So there's a lot of verses here describing it, but I'll go straight to the reference. And this is from the Brahma Samhita, Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo. The translation, the damsels of Vrindavan, the gopis, are super goddesses of fortune. Not just goddesses, super goddesses of fortune. The enjoyer in Vrindavan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The trees there are all wish-fulfilling trees, and the land is made of transcendental touchstone. The water is all nectar, the talking is singing, the walking is dancing, and the constant companion of Krishna is his flute. The effulgence of transcendental bliss is experienced everywhere. Therefore, Vrindavan Dham is the only relishable abode. It's mentioned there that the trees are Kalpavriksha trees, but people don't care so much what comes from the Kalpavriksha tree. Whatever comes, but they're more interested in engaging it in Krishna's service. There are jewels everywhere, and the Chintamani stone is used as toe rings for the gopis, because they don't care so much for the opulence. Rather, they use that opulence for Krishna's pleasure. This is what they all care for. So then Srivas Thakur, hearing this, starts dancing in ecstasy and starts clapping under his armpits. And seeing him dance like this, Mahaprabhu remembers the discussions that they had that day, and he starts dancing in ecstasy. And while he starts dancing and dancing and dancing, he forgets himself and forgets the devotees are getting exhausted. And he continues to dance and dance and dance to the extent that he himself manifested the form of Srimati Radharani. And seeing this, Lord Nityananda, out of respect, went to a distant place and paid his obeisances and respects. Then Swarup Damodar, seeing the situation, because Nitai was Lord Nityananda was the only one that was going to be able to stop Mahaprabhu from falling and crashing and hurting himself. So Swarup Damodar immediately came forward and stopped the Lord's kirtan and told him, this is not the situation is like this, please kindly stop. So Mahaprabhu stops and everyone takes rest. Later on, at the end of this chapter, Mahaprabhu then tells the residents of Kulinagram, Satyaraj and I believe it was Ramananda, and he tells them that, during the time when the Daitas were taking Jagannath, there was some silk ropes that was carrying him. They happened to break. So here's a sample of it. Please get ropes that are stronger like this, and every year when you come to Jagannath Puri, make sure that you bring these ropes. And so the residents of Kulinagram would always come. Every time when the Gundicha temple was being cleaned, they would present Mahaprabhu these ropes, these fine ropes. And in this way they performed their devotional service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during the Ratha Yatra festival. So that concludes this particular section of Mahaprabhu's Ratha Yatra pastimes. The reason why I sort of went through a lot of, in one sense, preamble before Ratha Yatra is because the chapters 11 and 12, they really set up the mood of the Ratha Yatra festival. Ratha Yatra festival in of itself is so much full of loving devotional sentiments, but when we start hearing about how it began from Snan Yatra, it's like a build-up. It's a build-up of separation and then finally union. So it comes together as one package, as a pastime, and I thought we could discuss it more and learn a bit more about that, given the period that we're in now as well. Lord Jagannath is currently enacting his pastime of being sick, so I thought that if I talk about Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can see how we are supposed to meditate on this period of time of Lord Jagannath's pastimes, and also meditate more on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because whenever there's a great opportunity, we should grab it. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll end here. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Shri Gaur Nithai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nithai Gaur Premanande, Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.